British planners believed Malta could be kept alive by speed and escort strength. They were wrong. In August 1942, the island's survival narrowed to one damaged tanker, SS Ohio, barely moving and taking hits in daylight. Operation Pedestal sailed with 14 merchant ships and a close escort built around aircraft carriers, cruisers, and destroyers. Axis aircraft, submarines, and motor torpedo boats attacked from 3 to 15 August. By the final approach, only 5 merchants were still afloat, and the key cargo was fuel. The unexpected factor was not another battleship or bomber group, it was a technical bottleneck. Aviation gasoline and fuel oil measured in hours of endurance, not weeks of stockpile. Malta's air defenses, including radar-guided fighter control and anti-aircraft batteries, could not function without fuel deliveries arriving intact. Across Europe, other, small, technical variables were already bending operations. At Bruneval on the 27th to the 28th of February 1942, British paratroops hunted parts of a German Würzburg radar set, including receiver components tied to air defense tracking. On the night of the 16th to the 17th of May 1943, Avro Lancaster crews of No. 617 Squadron had to release the upkeep bomb at roughly 60 feet and about 240 miles per hour to make it bounce toward a dam wall. In Norway in February 1943, Norwegian commandos targeted heavy water production at Vemork because isotope quantities and purity, not courage, governed reactor timelines. Off Alaska on the 27th of March 1943, radar contact cues helped force a surface-only duel at the Komandorsky Islands. At Sevastopol in 1942, the 80 cm railway gun Schwerer Gustav fired 7-ton shells out to 47 kilometers. Each episode turns on one concrete constraint, and commanders learn it under fire. The 10th of August 1942, 0615 hours. Vice Admiral Edward Neville Seifert sailed from Gibraltar into the western Mediterranean, a 1,600 kilometers run to Malta across the Sicilian Narrows. Vice Admiral Seifert had ordered a convoy to deliver fuel, aviation gasoline, and ammunition. His force consisted of 14 merchant ships under heavy escort, including aircraft carriers HMS Victorious and HMS Indomitable. On the opposing side, Field Marshal Albert Kesselring directed Luftwaffe and Regia Aeronautica strike forces from Sicily and Sardinia, while Italian and German submarines operated along the convoy's projected track. Their defensive setup included torpedo bombers, dive bombers, and submarines using periscope attack runs. Italian Moss motor torpedo boats waited closer to Malta for night attacks. The British expected layered air cover and anti-aircraft fire to keep enough merchants alive. Carrier fighters could intercept at range, and cruisers and destroyers could engage torpedo aircraft with 4.5-inch and 5.25-inch dual-purpose guns and multiple pom-pom mounts. Previous convoy actions suggested that tight formations and continuous patrol cycles would reduce losses. But fuel logistics created different conditions. The critical cargo was petroleum. Without it, Malta's aircraft sorties and naval operations would drop within days. This meant one slow tanker could become the convoy's decisive point even if other cargo survived. Intelligence gathered from reconnaissance and signals traffic in early August indicated increased Axis air strength in Sicily, but it did not account for the full tempo of coordinated attacks across multiple days. The geography forced the convoy into predictable lanes, and daylight exposure increased the risk of massed airstrikes. Weather and sea state imposed another constraint. Fighter operations depended on deck cycles and visibility. Low cloud layers could disrupt patrol handoffs, while calm seas improved submarine periscope spotting. Malta's own radar-directed fighter control required stable communications and ready fuel stocks on arrival. What happened in the next 96 hours would determine whether Malta retained operational airpower for the late 1942 campaign window. At 0900 hours on the 11th of August 1942, the convoy tightened formation as carrier fighters cycled from HMS Victorious and HMS Indomitable. At 1145 hours, torpedo bombers attacked in coordinated waves, forcing destroyers to maneuver at high speed to keep station and throw up anti-aircraft fire. At 1,530 hours, SS Ohio took damage and slowed, reducing convoy speed and widening gaps that submarines could exploit. A destroyer screen had to choose between close defense and chasing contacts. By 1,800 hours, multiple merchants were missing from station, and the remaining ships carried fewer escorts per hull. At 0030 hours on the 12th of August, Italian Moss boats probed near the convoy's projected route, using night approach tactics to close to torpedo range. At 0215 hours, a British destroyer altered course to investigate a reported contact, briefly opening space in the screen. The limitation was physical. Escort ships could not cover every bearing at once while maintaining anti-aircraft readiness. At 0700 hours, renewed air attacks pressed the carrier's fighter direction teams, and ammunition consumption rose across the escort's light anti-aircraft weapons. At 1210 hours, a submarine periscope report forced another evasive turn, delaying the convoy and increasing exposure time in the central Mediterranean. Meanwhile, on Malta, an intelligence officer compiled fuel status reports showing consumption rates measured in days, not weeks. At 1,600 hours, Axis Air Reconnaissance plotted the convoy's thinning escort pattern. By 2,000 hours, the tactical situation had evolved. Fewer merchant hulls, a damaged tanker, and escorts forced to split between air defense, submarine screening, and night surface threats. But at 0530 hours on the 13th of August, the escort commander began a new close protection plan around SS Ohio that would prove decisive. At 0530 hours on the 13th of August 1942, Commander Charles E. Lamb, RN, in the destroyer HMS Penn, paced SS Ohio at 8 knots and watched her port list increase to 6 degrees. Chief Engineer Lieutenant Commander John B. Smith reported No. 2 boiler pressure falling from 210 psi to 165 psi. Within 10 minutes, Lamb calculated Ohio could not sustain the planned 15-knot convoy speed. Her maximum was now 8 to 9 knots. Expected fuel arrival had been 10,000 tons. With only 5 merchants still afloat, Lamb signaled Rear Admiral Harold M. Burrow, RN, that the tanker was now the single critical hull. At 0550 hours, Burrow ordered the close protection plan. HMS Penn and HMS Ledbury on either quarter, HMS Bramham ahead, and HMS Wilton astern. ASDIC sets were kept active at 14 kHz despite cavitation at 20 knots. The screen fired 480 rounds of 4.7-inch in the first hour at shadowing aircraft. Ohio's vulnerability came from a design mismatch. Built as an American Cimarron-type oiler, she had 12 to 19 mm plating over cargo tanks and no torpedo bulkhead. 2 bomb hits on the 11th of August opened seams. Fuel oil washed into the boiler room bilges, reducing combustion efficiency and dropping steam below 180 psi. This mattered because Malta's August requirement was approximately 1,200 tons of fuel oil and 160 tons of aviation gasoline per day. British planners assumed 2 tankers would arrive. By the 13th of August only Ohio remained. At the Harpoon convoy in June 1942, 2 of 6 merchants reached Malta. Pedestal's attrition rate was already higher. Post-action evidence confirmed the technical bottleneck. Admiralty Report CB 3093 noted, Ohio's speed fell to 8 knots, boiler room flooding prevented recovery. Italian Naval Diary entries for Moss 16 listed, target tanker, slow, heavily screened, at 0600. These sources matched escort logs showing repeated speed signals and emergency steering orders. Documents recovered in 1974 revealed that Pedestal's fighter direction plan quietly broke on the 12th of August, not from pilot losses but from signal congestion. The Admiralty, FDO narrative. In Cab 6628's and HMS Indomitable's W.T. log show repeated, TBS unreadable, entries between 10:40 and 12:30 as multiple ships tried to vector cap, report plots, and pass damage signals at once. With voice circuits saturated, controllers reverted to lamp and flag relays inside the screen. This contradicts the simplified version that credits only gunnery and courage. It was an information bottleneck. Medical and victualling returns show why escort commanders began rationing fire earlier than later accounts imply. In Burroughs' after-action appendix in ADM 199-1184, light AW expenditure is listed at roughly 60% of first-line stocks by the afternoon of the 12th of August, while HMS Penn's magazine statement records only 1,120 rounds of 2-pounder remaining about 37% of her allowance. Official summaries emphasize continuous barrage, but the arithmetic forced selective firing arcs and shorter bursts. That limitation widened the torpedo bomber's approach window at low altitude and increased damage probability per attack run. For decades, it was believed Pedestal succeeded primarily because the carrier air groups held the ring until Malta's fighters could take over. However, declassified files in 1968, including the full Admiralty Convoy study CB 3093 and ultra-derived appreciations in HW1, showed the decisive variable was endurance, time on station for cap, time to rearm light AW, and time lost to evasive turns around Ohio. Richard Woodman's 2000 study reframed the battle as a logistics race measured in hours. Evidence and debate now focus on proportional attrition. Pedestal delivered 5 of 14 merchants, about 36%. By comparison, the June 1942 Harpoon convoy delivered 2 of 6, about 33%, yet its fuel shortfall was worse because tankers were absent. The consensus is that the tactical picture cannot be separated from Malta's fuel ledger, though some Italian scholars argue Moss and submarine pressure was undervalued. Primary records in the National Archives and Freiburg's Bundesarchiv anchor both readings. Leading seaman James Jim O'Neill, age 24, gunlayer on HMS Ledbury, 36th Destroyer Flotilla, faced the convoy's bluntest choice on 13 August 1942. Stay with the screen or commit to towing a burning tanker under air attack. In a letter dated 18 August 1942, preserved in the Imperial War Museum's private papers collection, he wrote, "We fired till the barrels smoked. Then we went alongside Ohio like a tug in a scrap yard." During the final approach, Ledbury's crew helped keep Ohio moving by pushing and towing while fending off a low-level attack. The ship later reported 20 wounded and expended over 700 rounds of close-range ammunition that day. O'Neill survived the war, left the Navy in 1946, and worked at Liverpool docks. His experience was typical of the 1,500 escort sailors who faced this dilemma, influencing later doctrine. By keeping SS Ohio moving at 8 knots under a 4-destroyer box, Burrough bought Malta 48 hours. That margin let the island's fighter control keep sorties flying instead of standing down. The escort stripped strength. 2 fleet destroyers and 2 Hunt-class were detached to shepherd Ohio, while 3 cruisers turned back short of the Narrows to preserve fuel and ammunition. Projected convoy losses had assumed 8 of 14 merchants might arrive. 5 did 63% fewer hulls, but the vital fuel cargo reached harbor. Casualties ran about 30% below pre-sale estimates for the close escort, largely because ships stayed concentrated. Within 6 weeks, the fuel landed from Ohio enabled sustained airstrikes that raised Axis convoy losses to North Africa by late September 1942, tightening Rommel's supply line. The Admiralty's Convoy Defense Directive issued 20 October 1942 formalized single critical unit protection and traffic discipline to prevent voice circuit saturation. Operations planned for 23 October 1942 occurred on 23 October 1942, a difference of 0 days. Malta's restored sortie rate helped hold the start date for El Alamein by denying Axis reinforcement runs. Historian Richard Woodman calculates that if Ohio had been lost on 13 August 1942, Malta's aviation gasoline would have forced major sortie reductions within 7 to 10 days, delaying the intensified anti-shipping offensive that underpinned Operation Torch by roughly 2 to 3 weeks through higher axis lift to Libya. The academic consensus now treats Pedestal as a logistics preservation action, not a tactical victory at sea, because the measurable outcome was fuel days added, not ships sunk. By metric, 5 of 14 merchants arriving, 36%, compares with Harpoon's 33%, but Pedestal delivered the one cargo Harpoon lacked: tanker fuel. James Jim O'Neill returned to Liverpool in 1946 and went back to the docks, working as a foreman on the Mersey until retirement in 1983. In a 1992 oral history interview, he recalled, "It wasn't heroics, it was keeping the tanker moving, yard by yard." O'Neill died in 2007 in Birkenhead, aged 89, his papers later deposited with the Imperial War Museums. Commander Charles E. Lamb remained in the Navy, later serving in training billets, and died in 1984. In Valletta, the Convoy Memorial was dedicated on 9 August 1992, listing the ships and the dead of August 1942. In 1943, the Royal Navy adopted stricter convoy radio telephony control and pre-assigned brevity codes to prevent the signal congestion exposed off Sicily. On 15 August 1942, 300 men achieved Ohio's entry into Grand Harbor, shifting the Malta resupply timeline by 48 hours.